a very diverse panel for the roundtable discussion. And instead of me introducing them, I'd like for each of them to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their story, because we have such a diverse panel up here, and to give you an idea of who we have for this discussion. So if I could have you each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay, I'll start. Hello, everyone. My name is Arliss Reynolds. I think I'm here in my capacity as a city council member in Costa Mesa. I was elected in the last election, so I'm 2 or 3 months in, which feels like 2 or 3 years in already. We've been very, very busy on the city council. Kind of reversing in time a little bit, I am a mechanical engineer. I got my undergraduate degree from MIT. At that time, my focus was robotics. I was very interested in that field. And when I was graduating, it was about the time that climate change and these global warming issues were really starting to come back into the forefront again. About my senior year at MIT, MIT launched its energy initiative. And so I started taking some classes in that area and sort of moved from designing efficient robots to looking at designing efficient buildings. So I've built my career in really in energy efficiency and specifically evaluation of energy efficiency programs. My job was to study projects and programs and technologies to see what was really effective in reducing energy consumption. And about 10 years into my career, I realized, gosh, we're providing a lot of reports to decision makers and policymakers who just put those reports on their table and make whatever decision they want to make anyways. So that combined with a number of other recent events got me interested in politics, and I decided to run for city council in Costa Mesa, my hometown. I was also doing a lot of local activism work on park space and preservation of natural spaces in Orange County. So all those things kind of came to a head, and here I am helping set priorities for Costa Mesa and hopefully driving some change in Orange County.
So hello, everyone. My name's Jose Trinidad Castaneda. I actually met Arliss at the same time. We were both Parks and Recreation Commissioners for our cities, and both stepping into the realm of elected office. Currently, I'm a Parks and Recreation Commissioner and a community organizer. I work for a nonprofit called the William C. Velasquez Institute as their climate policy coordinator, and we work on engaging Latino and Native communities throughout Los Angeles on climate issues. I studied biology and anthropology and got a minor in women's gender sexuality studies, so I try to cover a broad range of disciplines, and I can see how that's shaping who I am today. So I'd just like to thank you for staying with us, and hopefully we're not keeping you from the food for too long, but again, as a reminder, we are on Ahashiman territory, ancestral Ahashiman land, so just giving a shout out to our Ahashiman brothers and sisters.
Hi everyone. Fine. We're doing a. Okay, Oh, okay. I thought you were doing an acknowledgement first, and I broke the silence. Oh. I'm sorry. Hi everyone. I'm Gianna Lum. I'm a fourth-year undergraduate student in Earth System Science and Urban Studies, and I'm president of the UC Irvine branch of Climatepedia and associate director of the organization. So we are a climate communications organization that spreads awareness about climate change. So we go to middle schools to teach children. We have a website, climatepedia.org, where we try to simplify the science of climate change and put it online. And this past year, we've been working on a project called Climate Memes. And Climate Memes turns climate data and facts about sustainability into memes so that it's more accessible and goes viral online to teach the public. And I also helped organize the UC Irvine climate movement that was on March 15th. It was part of the larger Fridays for Future movement led by Greta Thunberg and popularized in New Zealand. And at UCI, we really wanted to have the university take a stronger stance on climate change and communicate the science with the community better and to collaborate more with the city of Irvine. So that's all in the process, and we just started making more publicity on March 15th.
Thank you all. So as you can see, we have a diverse set of backgrounds that are being represented, from local to surrounding city environments and people who have a lot of varying experience. So, in your view, what are the top environmental and science issues in Southern California that need to be addressed?
I'll go first again. Okay. So it's funny, when I first read this question, right, what are the top issues? One of my big struggles is just narrowing down the list. So what do we focus on? I've actually, even after I won my election, I've still been sort of surprised by how much potential influence we have at the local level. And I think one of the most important areas related to these global issues of climate change that we have is infrastructure, right? City infrastructure. So we know in California, we have these aggressive greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And we know that one of the most important ways that we can reach those targets is getting off fossil fuels, but getting kind of transitioning our transportation modes right now. So at the city level, we have essentially total authority in how we design our roads to influence people to get out of their cars. And we have a lot of influence in supporting the electrification of vehicles. So we have, as a city council, listed our priorities for the year, and one of our top priorities is active transportation. In 2018, we approved an active transportation plan. So these are specific, not just objectives, but projects to support bikeability, walkability. We're adding scootability in there and public transportation infrastructure. And so by calling those our priorities at the city level, we're basically promising to attach budget to those objectives as well. I say promising because we're not at that point yet, but getting it on our list of priorities is one of the key steps to get in that direction. I think the other piece that we have a lot of influence at the city level, of course, again, it's planning related, and that is protecting the open space that we have. In Costa Mesa, we have not just a good amount of park space, but natural park space with some really special biological resources and cultural resources. And lucky for us, our residents really value that natural open space as well. So not just protecting them from development, but putting some money into the restoration of those resources is something that we'll be doing. And I'll add to that, I think a really important piece in the broader climate movement is engaging the public to treasure those natural resources. So in addition to investing in some of the restoration and preservation, this year, we are gonna be doing a big education campaign to get the kids out and adults out to just love being outdoors and learning about some of the rare species that we have.
Just to follow up on that, I know land use is one of the top things that will unify us. And if you're a scientist looking into local politics, land use is the area that you're going to want to look at, especially. Whenever I delve into land use discussions, I try to bring up the climate, transit, and housing nexus, sometimes the water, energy nexus as well. And if we're thinking about the physics-based timeline, where that is our reality, we know we only have a limited amount of time to radically change the way that our cities are designed. And that includes transportation. So I've been introducing the idea that we need to look at Orange County Transportation Authority's studies, their corridor studies, and provide some political will towards massive infrastructure projects along the highly frequented corridors like Beach Boulevard, like Harbor Boulevard, and even State College from Cal State Fullerton to UCI. And so one of the things I've been working on is working with Buena Park elected officials, Connor Trout, Sunny Kim, to start pushing for the need or a vision for a light rail, an electric light rail from La Habra all the way to Huntington Beach. That's a massive infrastructure project that hopefully will get people out of their cars, but will also connect them with valuable open spaces like the beaches in Huntington Beach, as well as West Coyote Hills and Fullerton. So it's this multi-layered attempt to connect the dots between housing, making sure there's affordable housing all throughout, connected by electric rail, as well as connecting people with the environment. In the urban spaces in North Orange County, it's very park poor. So we want to make sure that residents who have historically been left out of the conversation or have been planned out, redlined out of open spaces have immediate access to that in the coming years ahead.
When you asked this question, I wasn't sure if you wanted it from the science side or the policy side. And since it's a science policy symposium, I guess I'll answer it from both ends. There's a recent study released by climate scientists at UCLA last year evaluating how Southern California is going to be affected by climate change. And as a result of all the greenhouse gas emissions that we're emitting into the atmosphere, the temperature in the atmosphere and the temperature in the oceans is going to increase. And as a result, there's going to be more water vapor in the atmosphere. So we're going to actually see our weather patterns changing. We're going to see a lot wetter winters when we do get wet winters, and a lot drier summers when we see dry summers. And all our rain is just going to be condensed in one part of the year. So we're going to see a lot more flooding, and that's problematic for infrastructure. People usually don't die of drought nowadays, but people still die of floods. People's homes are lost, and we really need to figure out how are we going to change our infrastructure, how are we going to have people more prepared for sea level rise, for really heavy rainfall. And also we need to think about, in our really dense area in Southern California, how are we going to build more homes with this housing crisis? Do we want to keep building on the urban fringe? And some people want to, but I don't think that's a good idea because more homes will be vulnerable to wildfires. So we have to be mindful of that too, with more and more wildfires happening, more intense wildfires happening due to climate change.
Thank you all. So the next question, what are your organization/city visions for climate policy and solutions? I know you all got a little bit at that, but with the changing climate, like what are you all doing, or what do you foresee is going to change in the next 5 years, 10 years, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. So two things I want to leave you with. They're relatively new or novel ideas, but I think they'll really gain traction as we talk more about electrification, and that is microgrids. So if you don't know what a microgrid is, it's essentially, battery, solar panels, and city officials will have a new responsibility to look at land in relation to how we produce energy locally. I think producing local energy is going to be one of the ways we adapt to climate change, to aridification, and build more resilient communities. As we know, SoCal Edison's capacity is limited by its current plans. My own neighborhood went through a blackout, so 237 residents were without power for 11 hours during the floods, or during the rains. And so it wasn't even like a heat wave that knocked out the power lines. It was the wind and the water that presented a challenge to our infrastructure. So having local energy produced right in our own cities is a way to go with microgrids. And I also proposed for the city to create an ad hoc committee for an urban forest management plan. Currently, if you look across Orange County, which I don't know if you have the time, but you can check out urban forest master plans that have been introduced by city staff in multiple different cities. And all the cities do not have any elements about soil regeneration or native plant species. And so you will see a lot of foreign plant species that are considered drought tolerant, but in reality have much more negative consequences through their root systems, through their just how much water they take. And that's something I'd like for our city in Fullerton to look at, especially when we think about disadvantaged communities. And disadvantaged communities are just hot spots and have microclimates that are really just the definition of the urban heat island. And if we can introduce a plan that better allocates funds for urban forests in predominantly disadvantaged communities, but all throughout the city, I think we'll be better prepared to actually go out at night and be able to walk our dogs when it's 80 to 90 degrees and at like 10 p.m.
So, gosh, I have a long list of things that I want to accomplish, especially if you gave me a 5 or 10 year timeline. But I'll touch back on the active transportation piece again. I used to joke, so I grew up here in Orange County and then moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts for school. And I remember I could not keep up with people walking because it wasn't in my muscle memory to walk as a means of transportation. I would joke that the furthest I ever walked was if I parked my car on the curb instead of the driveway. It's not part of our culture to walk. And it has to be now, right? Like we have to address these issues that we're dealing with. We need to sort of bring that culture into Orange County, an area that wasn't built to support any kind of active transportation or public transportation. So I hope that you see out of Costa Mesa, and I expect that you'll see out of Costa Mesa, us working not just on the infrastructure to facilitate public transportation, again, walking, biking, scooting, and whatever else people come up with, but also us trying to generate some of the culture around that as well. We have a growing group of residents who are trying to do that a little bit more. We want to make activities where we sort of incentivize people to get there on public or on foot or on bike. So I hope that we can be maybe a trend-setting city in that sense, and make walking and biking fun, and sort of turn that fun into normal activity, which again should sort of grow more interest and support to make it easier for us to give more budget to that type of infrastructure. Really the same thing around parks. A couple other specific projects. I mentioned some of the natural resources that we have in the city. One of the challenges, I think, in protecting some of the natural resources is that they're managed by so many different entities. So in Costa Mesa, we manage this, beautiful canyon park, which is part of the coastal zone. We have a 200-acre Fairview Park. Those are adjacent to Talbot Park, which are supposed to be managed by OC Parks. Technically, in OC Park's jurisdiction, we're trying to get them to manage that a little bit better. Those are adjacent to some wetlands that are managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, which is adjacent to 400-acre Banning Ranch, which is privately owned, all along the Santa Ana River with Huntington Beach on the other side. So there's so many different entities that really aren't working together, even though it's a really incredible connected ecosystem. And there's really valuable wetlands there. And maybe I should have known this, but I just learned recently that wetlands are now being recognized as the second most effective carbon capture resource. So it's great for both mitigation and adaptation. So we're going to be using that fact to try to get some more money to help with some restoration along the Santa Ana River down at the end. Other things, so I always, as an energy efficiency person, when people talk about renewable energy, I always say, but energy efficiency first, right? There's nothing cleaner than the energy that you don't use. So, infusing some of the efficiency practices throughout our city operations, from efficient buildings to just reducing waste overall, will be something that I want to push throughout anything that we have control over. And I don't know exactly what this looks like yet, and I would love help from anyone who's interested, is just kind of everything that our city has influence over: planning, our city operations, our park maintenance operations. I just want to sort of infuse efficiency and sustainability practices across all of those things. So we've, in the few months that we've been involved, we've got our staff who used to leave us plastic water bottles at all of our meetings. We said, no, we're bringing our own water bottles, and we want to see, a jar of water that we can pull. So we're not using plastic bottles. We get our packets of information delivered, and they used to be delivered in a big plastic bag. So we said, buy us a reusable bag that we can, reuse instead of creating waste every time. So we're sort of, in addition to some bigger policies that we'll be proposing, just kind of everyday things. We're trying to change the culture at City Hall, and I hope we can use that to just kind of show some leadership in the area, and hope that there's spillover effects as well. Oh, I forgot to, can I mention one more thing? Sorry, I'm excited about this. So there's also setting, this list is long, setting some sort of loftier goals to direct staff to where we want to go and also try to get some headlines. So one of the things we've been really busy with as a city council is addressing the situation of homelessness in our city. We're 2 weeks away, I think, from opening our first shelter for people experiencing homelessness. And we are also acquiring a property to be basically a permanent shelter. And I've said, I want that to be a net zero energy shelter. Like, what can we do to have that be sort of a demonstration shelter? There's no reason we can't also do that. So we've engaged with SoCal Edison. We're going to do an energy efficiency audit. And I've told staff that that's my expectation. I think we can get it. I think it'd be a great, not just headline, but demonstration to show that this can be done. And then we should be able to show how much money we're saving by it. So those types of projects, I think, should help accelerate some of those efforts.
So Climatepedia is a climate communications organization. So as scientists, like many scientists, we want to be an unbiased, politically neutral entity. However, we believe that the more information people know about climate change and know what's going on with our environment, the more they will be empowered to take action and promote policies and tell city officials what they want in their local communities. So to educate the public and have more transparency on the science, we have a petition called the Tyndall Petition. It's on climatepedia.org, and we have about 700 scientists right now who have done research on climate change. They all have PhDs, not necessarily on climate science, but some have done urban planning research, economics research, some are lawyers, but they've all done some kind of research on climate change. So we're showing that these are people who have dedicated their lives to the issue, and it's not some kind of hoax, essentially. And so we're just trying to have all the facts out there, but we also realize that climate change is a framing issue too. It's almost a marketing issue. So we're trying to tailor our website in a way that people of all different kinds of backgrounds, different interests can figure out why climate change is affecting them and why they should care. We're working on the website still, but we have a section for people who are firefighters or people who work on humanitarian issues, why people who are religious should care about climate change. So it's really a framing issue, and there is certainly a reason why you should care about climate change if you already don't. Aside from Climatepedia, I said that I also led the UC Irvine climate movement. So another petition that we started with that movement is the UCI climate movement petition. So we have 3 main points from that petition, and if you'd like during dinner, you can also sign it if you support it. The first point is to have more collaboration and more conversations on climate change within the UCI community and with the surrounding Orange County community. We believe that as a research institution, UC Irvine really should be sharing all this wonderful research that we have, and we really should be influencing the policies within our local government, and we believe there isn't enough communication going on there. And to get to our greenhouse gas reductions goals faster, we really need more communication on that end. The second point is to have more of a leadership role. Again, with more communication, we can have more of a leadership role within our local and national politics. And our third point for the UCI climate petition is to get UCI to look at our zero emissions deadlines and try to hit our goals sooner, because the latest IPCC report states that we have 11 years before our planet starts seeing catastrophic environmental effects. So we believe that as a university, we should really try to move faster with those goals and see where we can fit that in our budget.
Forgot to mention, I mean, you inspired me to see this more as a victory. I didn't see this as a victory because oftentimes people don't realize you can build a relationship with your city manager and get legislation passed through the city manager, just completely going around the elected officials that might represent you. So one of the victories that I haven't even considered until right now is waste. And so that's a huge environmental issue that we didn't even touch on. And what I was able to do was help influence the city manager to implement a recycling market development zone in Fullerton. And essentially what that is it allows companies to just give each other their waste, and it helps facilitate that better than ever. And I really envision the city doing more, but also other agencies we don't talk about. Your high school district board of trustees has a lot of power. High school and public schools in general are some of the biggest land caretakers in all of the Southern California metropolitan area. And so I was working with a trustee to develop a community composting center, a demonstration site at one of our high school farms. It stalled a little bit during the elections, but it's springtime, so I'm sure right now is the best time to revisit that. Because if we think about how waste impacts emissions or just the oceans, our ecosystems in general, we don't make the connection between how much waste we produce at home and what goes into our oceans unless we're looking at videos of turtles with straws in their noses. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So I think another frontier that is going to be challenging but very doable within the next 10 years is zero waste, transitioning towards a world where most of the products we produce and consume can regenerate the soils. There we go.
Well, next time we invite you, we will not have plastic water bottles. That's on me. I should have noticed that. So now we will open it up to questions from the audience.
Okay, hi. I basically have 3 questions. So the first one is on active transportation. I think that is great, but is there, in sort of like prioritizing that, I'm just wondering about where do individuals with disabilities fit in, and that's why I think there needs to be a greater push on the public transportation end. And I just wanted to get your reaction on that. Do I ask the rest of the questions or do I wait for an answer first? Okay.
Yeah, so considering people with disabilities is absolutely part of the conversation. We have a council meeting tomorrow where we're making appointments to different committees. We have a committee on walkability and bikeability. I'm the liaison to that committee, so I kind of pick the people, and I purposely am picking someone who said that they have a disability that prevents them from driving. I don't know if it's a mobility one, but I said I want that person on our committee because they're going to have a very different perspective than the 30-something person who bikes 20 miles to work every day, right? So yeah, it's really important, and one of the both informational tools and community engagement tools we're going to be doing are walk audits. So these are something that should be really fun. We want to make them fun events, but that's where we get input from kids walking to school, to our seniors walking to the library, to people walking to the grocery store. What routes are they taking and where do they feel unsafe? From cracks in the sidewalk to intersections to speeding. So yeah, I think it's really important that we're getting a broad variety of perspectives in what active transportation means. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And I'll sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Since you mentioned public transportation, that is a really important thing that I think we have to undo at the city. The previous city council had a very different perspective than us. One of their solutions to addressing homelessness in our city was actually to remove bus shelters from all of our bus stops. And so, every time I drive by a bus stop and see someone standing there, with no protection from rain or sun, it drives me nuts. And I know that we actually get revenue from advertisements on those bus shelters. So that'll be, it should be a very non-controversial thing to try to bring those back, especially since we have now some solutions in place to address homelessness.
Thank you. So I'm I don't know if you've seen in the news, there is sort of like a crisis with recycling where China and India aren't buying as much recycling from the US. And so I was wondering what's happening on the local level in your cities, and any plans to address that.
So 2 years ago, I went to almost every city council meeting that I could, and I was part of the Sierra Club Conservation Committee's effort to push cities to adopt a 10-year zero waste reduction plan. And that was mandated by the state and approved by the county. So in 2017, there was really this small group of people that were pushing for zero waste in the cities. the way that cities are implementing it is they are installing grates, grate covers at the storm drains. How fast they do it, it's not up to me. It's definitely internal city staff direction. But they install grates to prevent waste from going out to the ocean, and that's as far as they know they can get. But personally, if we're going to see real, tangible change and recognize that other countries are no longer buying our waste, then we have to we have to recycle it here. We have to allow for our city code to adopt more recyclable materials in housing projects or in other construction projects. If you look at your city code, you'll see that some cities allow for housing to be built with recycled materials. Some cities allow for 90% of all construction waste to be kept within city limits, and other cities have nothing. So there's a lot of steps we can take in following other city examples, but when I envision the next steps for elected officials and city councils, it's directing staff to develop organic waste policies where they'll have specific commercial zones that they will have to donate or sell their organic waste to local agencies and companies that will have commercial composting. And when it comes to plastic, we need to be bold. We need to take steps to reduce single-waste plastics to a point where we're no longer relying on them for a majority of things. My sister, having grown up and defending her all my life, needed straws in order to drink liquids at, a couple years in her life. When you have Down syndrome, you have different physiological and just anatomical issues. And so I know we need I know we need straws, but the material is the question. Do we need plastic straws? No, we need compostable straws, and what material that is it's up to the people, really. It's up to the city council.
Hi, I met you yesterday at the workshop, Gianna. So I was at a climate action plan workshop yesterday that Melissa Fox from Irvine City Council was there. So I kind of know a little more about Irvine's perspective on community choice energy, but I'm wondering what position Costa Mesa and Fullerton have on those kinds of opportunities for reducing greenhouse emissions.
I wish I had a sort of prepared answer for that, because we get that question a lot. One of the challenges for us, so I'll say it hasn't been on an agenda yet. It hasn't risen to near the top of our priority list yet. A few of the constraints that we have are money, of course, and staff resources. So in the initial conversations that I have had, there's certainly interest, right? And we don't even have a energy manager or sustainability manager at our city. So that's sort of step number one in our upcoming fiscal year budget, which is the first one that our new city council gets to shape. We've requested that position to have someone kind of full-time be a leader in that space. We're trying to, again, do the zero waste and efficiency part of that as a city, developing our own community choice aggregator is probably not something that we would want to take on. I like the idea of a broader regional piece, but again, the focus is on efficiency and zero waste and kind of doing the right things. We'll get there.
As for Fullerton, all of the Fullerton elected officials are very well aware of CCE or community choice aggregation. There has been zero political will. And now that a new council has been elected into office, there's a chance that it can come to the agenda. But again, the CCAs are incredibly expensive. The upfront cost is in the millions, and a lot of our cities we have impacted budgets. So where do we get the funding from? Well, at this stage, the more viable solution for some of our cities is to to recommend or vote on a recommendation to join a JPA. For anyone who doesn't know, a JPA is a Joint Powers Authority. It would be a nonprofit agency that runs the CCE. So I can envision Fullerton doing that. How soon? Well, we'll have to see after 2020. But we're nowhere near where we should be in terms of that, the CCE.
Is everyone aware what community choice energy is, though? No? Okay. I can explain what it is. I realized you just dove into it. But essentially, community choice energy allows homeowners to decide how much of their energy they want to be renewable. They can have partial community choice energy, so I think lean energy is about 30%. They can do clean energy, which is 50% renewable, or they can do 100% renewable. And they can pay a different rate based on how much renewable energy they want. And it gives homeowners just the choice of how much they want to do for the environment and what their economic means are.
And just to fill in on that, there's two public agencies you should look more into. Southern California Edison, which is our energy provider, but also SoCal Gas. And for those of you who don't know, SoCal Gas has been launching a public campaign to lobby city council members to support what is a quote-unquote clean renewable gas. And what we're seeing is that it's a very thinly veiled attempt to change the conversation when CCE is introduced into cities. And if you think about the kind of appliances, electric appliances that are zero emissions, like electric stoves, electric dryers, etc., none of them use natural gas, and it will put Southern California Gas out of business. So I think when you think about CCEs, think about how in the larger political realm, other agencies see that as an attack on their company. So it's a tricky thing to balance, and that might be a reason why there's a delay in acting on clean energy. But we know that the trend is solar and wind are vastly becoming more affordable for cities to purchase. So cross your fingers, but we're gonna get this done.
And efficiency.
Efficiency.
Hi, my question's for Gianna. I heard your little spiel about Climatepedia and everything that you guys are doing, which is fantastic. A lot of it seems to be of the more passive nature, and I was just curious if you guys have anything in the works that's a little bit more proactive in terms of fighting climate change, maybe, or do you have any idea of anything that you would like to do in terms of that respect?
So we actually also have an internship program, the Climatepedia Student Certificate Program. So it's a 12-week program where we give students articles and videos about climate change, and then we do a 1-hour Skype call with them, discussion session online every week. And then in return, they also do some internship activities for us. Sometimes it's stuff with the website, finding more data, and finding more signatories, professors around the country who want to agree to the Tyndall petition. We've also collaborated with the Break Free Plastic movement in Nigeria. There's somebody who actually just DM'd our meme page and was like, we really need help making flyers, and somebody who's good at graphic design to make posters to put all around Nigeria to get people to stop using single-use plastic. So our interns actually helped with that. We also helped with, in the Mirage School of Business, the Center for Global Leadership and Sustainability. We collaborated with a sociology PhD student named Ben Leffel, and we helped him map out the European Union emissions trading system. So we hope from that data, people can learn where all this trade's happening and where the biggest emitters are. So I guess we're more of a knowledge-based organization, but we're hoping through everything that we're creating, people can take more action from it, because we want to be more neutral and unbiased in that aspect.
Actually, Arliss, you made me think of this when you told us about how your longest walk was from the curb to your house. And I'm just wondering, on a large scale, if there's any thought given to, a lot of this country is designed to be car-centric. And I've just spent the better part of a decade overseas and seeing a lot of European cities. And I'm just wondering, I mean, a lot of this seems like Band-Aids on a larger problem, which is the way our cities are designed. I find it ironic to have this conversation in Irvine because our roads in particular are so aggravating. I don't see any reason to be doing 60 miles an hour through this beautiful park-like setting that we have. So, but it's going to be really hard to get anyone to want to walk or cycle 10 miles. You need to make communities that have more to offer within a reasonable distance, and that's a large project. But when I think of California, I think a lot of the world thinks of California. They look at us as the trendsetters, and we're the ones that have to kind of show this stuff. So I'm just wondering if that's even possible, if that discussion is happening anywhere.
Yes, and yes.
And I think this is good probably because this is something that Gianna has to get on to and trying to get people excited about it.
Yeah, no, it's the biggest challenge, right? In the goal I articulated of trying to get people out of their vehicles. Our cities, Southern California was not designed for people to move around without being in a personal vehicle. We absolutely are having the conversation of how do we design our cities so that people can live without a car. There are people who do it now. There tend to be the more rugged ones. They, have the $2,000 electric bike and are driving the 10 miles, or I'm sorry, riding the 10 miles to and from work. We have a very, very interesting development project coming up, and I think this is going to be one of the big tests for our council and for the messaging that Trinidad talked about. Sorry, Jose Trinidad talked about. I know you as Trinidad. About how all of these things are related, right? So we have this development project that is a giant mixed-use development project, which is very unusual in most of Orange County. There's a little bit more in Irvine, and we did we call it general plan screening, so kind of general feedback about the project, and parking is a big part of every conversation when development comes up. And so we specifically said, we were interested in this project if there's a compelling case to be made for people to be able to live there without owning a car. And it's the first draft of the project is compelling. And I shared that I know this can work because I lived it, right? I lived in a dense building on a main street in between two universities with a lot going on. I was able to walk to dinner, walk to the movies, walk to my friend's house, walk to the park. Rarely had to get in my car. So it's absolutely part of the conversation. This is going to be an interesting project because it's so big. You need that density to support that kind of project where you have, grocery nearby and restaurant nearby and so on. It's going to actually go to a vote of our residents. So the city council doesn't get to approve it on our own. We'll approve it. We may approve it. And then the residents will need to approve it. So it's the onus is on this developer to really tell this story of that kind of community. There's a lot we have to, I can't commit to voting on it. Of course, there's a lot we have to deal with, but I hope that type of vision really works. It's going to be a really good example. What the vision is right now is, I think, going to be a really good example of what life in Southern California can be without a car, because it's this development adjacent to the Santa Ana River. So if we kind of get improving the riverbed and making that a nice recreational area, that's going to be an incredible asset for people to bike to the beach or jog to the beach. It's adjacent to SoCal, which some of you may know, a place with the #1 restaurant in Orange County and LA is in Costa Mesa at SoCal. So it's accessible to great restaurants. A few blocks away, coming online, are a bunch of new creative office spaces. So we're expecting that young professionals that are coming into these creative workspaces, who are going to be making enough to afford to live in this, what's going to be a nice development with some affordable housing built in. The vision is there, and I think that's what we need to be doing more. We're talking about that a lot more, about how do we start to blur the lines a little bit that separate our residential zones from our commercial zones, from our industrial zones. some of the kind of engagement activity I've mentioned will be about, trying to get people to walk from their homes. It's interesting. I'm learning about this too. There might be some urban planners in the room who know this better than me. Since I've moved back from Boston, I acknowledge that where I used to, without even thinking, I would walk a mile to the local bookstore to do my homework or have some coffee. I'll get in my car to drive a block to the donut shop on a Sunday morning, right? Like I'm learning that there's also a lot in just how streets are designed that encourage people to walk and not. So that's some of the easier changes to make. And I talked about infusing some of these practices in our policies. We have our city policies for how we design our parkways and medians, making sure we have the staff at our city joke that like I love trees except palm trees. Like I want to get palm trees off the palette of acceptable trees because they provide no value and they're very expensive to maintain. So things like that, we can say every new parkway needs to have enough shade to make it a pleasant walk. So there's some of those design elements as well.
Add on that, how many of you are familiar with a new bill called SB 50? Okay, so we got one person. It's essentially a bill that will help incentivize or encourage transit-oriented development. And so in Fullerton, we were historically built around a train station. And I think it's time to return to some of those elements. If we think about how you move around regionally, you're either in a car or you take the Metrolink. And so I think there's an opportunity to support concepts, initiatives like that, where we build taller, denser housing, predominantly mixed use, on those highly frequented corridors or near transit stations. And so city councils would develop specific plans with their city staff, but you as an individual can actually advocate or call, message, communicate with your assembly representative that this is a bill you want passed. So look up SB 50 or hashtag SB 50 and think about how, as scientists, you can't really have a home in California. You can't afford to live here, even with a PhD. So, for housing.
So actually sort of building off that, a little bit of what you both just said. So one of the things, I don't think like anybody here really needs to be convinced about how important these issues are, but as you said, like facing a lot of like funding issues, and like a lot of the time, like, I guess like one of the issues that I see is that when you're talking about the roads and making it things more conducive to doing these other things, it's also kind of the people's voting choices in that way. So a lot of these kind of decisions that need to be made are going to be going against people's own self-interest in terms of like, it's going to be potentially in the short term more difficult to commute or do these other kinds of things. So I think when you have a more climate infused perspective, you're willing to make those sacrifices, you're kind of putting things away, but sometimes people don't have the economic means to be able to take that hit in the short term, or just don't have that as part of their perspective at all. So I'm curious in terms of trying to get these things done, you earlier talking about different ways to not necessarily have to go through legislative means as much, which can really tie things up. But what are some of the strategies that you all are hoping to use to get people rallying behind these kinds of like bigger or hopefully like these more impactful kind of thing? Like I love like the light rail idea that you were bringing up before, but those are the kinds of ideas I think would be most politically challenging. So how you all see that, and what you think that people like us who are invested in these issues, beyond kind of like the more information sharing, like how to organize people or around making those kind of sacrifices, or like the kinds of trade-offs that are inevitably going to happen with these kinds of policies.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know many people who like love being in their car on a freeway on a Wednesday for an hour at a time or more. I think that the community engagement part is so important. I like to use the homelessness vote that we took as a good example of why community engagement is so important. You've probably heard the headlines in other cities where when a council voted for a homeless shelter, they had it on their agenda, hundreds of residents showed up, or there was a threat of a recall. I'm so proud that in our 2 votes for homeless shelters, a temporary one and a permanent one, we had resounding support and even applause after the vote. And I attribute a lot of that to a lot of hard work we put in ahead of time, educating the public on why this is important, not just to care for people, but more cost effective. We literally went door to door, me and the mayor, in my neighborhood, the area around one of the shelters we proposed, and knocked on people's doors on a Saturday morning in the rain to talk to people one-on-one. It was a lot of work and a lot of extra time, but we felt that payoff, and it made the vote very easy because people understood why we were doing this. I think supporting bike lanes and better walkability and you know, a grocery store closer to you or a restaurant closer to you are much less controversial than a shelter opening up. So I'm pretty optimistic actually about those conversations. We're starting to, I talked about blurring the lines a little bit between our zones, and people are excited by that. We've got a new restaurant at the corner of my neighborhood that once upon a time was a gas station. It got turned into a little boutique restaurant, or a boutique retail place that didn't really work, and now it's a pizza shop. Very good. Come eat in Costa Mesa. We've got great restaurants. People in my neighborhood walk there and love it, and people feel so good when they walk there, and you know, you can eat an extra slice because you know you're going to walk home. And so I think kind of creating those experiences in every next one is growing the interest and support for that type of development. We will have a big challenge in this conflict between a pressure to widen roads, right, and alleviate a lot of the traffic issues that people have and parking issues that people have, you know, and you know, my resistance to say no, like widening roads is the absolute wrong direction. And I can't wait until we get to where a lot of people expect to be with electrification and autonomous vehicles. The predictions are that a baby born today will never have a driver's license and probably will never know how to drive because people aren't gonna own cars anymore. And if we were there now, the predictions are if that happens, then all of the parking space we have now will be useless and can be recaptured for homes or for open park space. I wish we could get there so we didn't have this tension of people wanting wider lanes. That's going to be a difficult conversation, and I think it just adds to the urgency of creating these positive experiences of like how much nicer it is to get somewhere on a bike or on your feet or in a shared vehicle. Hopefully that answered. That's my strategy.
Climatepedia has our meme page on Instagram. It's climate_memes. And we're really just trying to change the culture that way too, through memes and having facts about sustainability, just funny things that are super relatable, so people see like, oh, like I can do that too. And in the comment section, we also have a lot of people interacting with each other, and we now have people from all over the world following our meme page. We had one meme that we posted yesterday. It was just on our story about plastic wrapping on vegetables, and then somebody from New Zealand commented like, wow, that's kind of appalling the US does that. And it's just interesting to see the different practices around the world and how we can learn from each other. Aside from climate memes, there's also another meme page. It's on Facebook that somebody else started called New Urbanist Memes for Transit-Oriented Teens, NUMTOT. And people from all over the world too just share all the different public transit memes about their own cities, and we can all learn from each other what they're doing in England, what the bus system is in other universities. And one time it was almost like a fight going on in the meme page, and somebody at the University of Michigan said, our buses at the University of Michigan are the best, like, fight me on this. So I posted, well, the UCI ones look really nice, and they're 100% electric. And then there are all these fights going on of like who had the best bus system. So I think if we can make it fun, we can find solutions that way too.
Well, if you could all thank me in joining the panelists. Hopefully they'll stay around for the networking session. So if you have any more questions you just have to ask, you might get to ask them over a sandwich. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
And I would just like to thank everyone for coming and making this event a reality. I am so grateful that it became what it was. Thank you all for coming and staying up until the very end, coming to the networking session. You know, science policy is not just a one-day thing. I hope that this is something that you all continue on in your lives, continue engaging in it, reading about it, reaching out to your city council members. Now you know a few, getting to know more about what's going on in your local neighborhoods and your campuses, et cetera, and just really engaging, because as you heard, like, you know, these are people who have committed their lives to it, and we're all scientists or relate in science with science in every single way, and I think that we could all engage in policy at different levels. We would also hope that you take what you learned today and let us know in the survey if you liked it or if you hated it. We need that feedback so that we can continue supporting events like this. And also, we will be asking the speakers to share any of the resources that they might have talked about today, any fellowships that they might have mentioned, scholarships, flyers, events, et cetera, and we'll be sending that to you out shortly. And thank you all once again. I hope you join us for the networking session. We got lots of food, so I hope you're hungry. And the organizers and I will be there as well. Thank you again to all our sponsors. And yeah, enjoy your night. Thank you.